What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for another stats comparison video for you guys today. We're going to be comparing the first 10 games and the last 10 games under Ange Postecoglou, because a lot has been made out of how good Spurs were in the first 10 games, and since the injuries have come back, the suspensions have come back in the last 10 games, why hasn't it got back to those levels of those first 10 games? So we're going to be delving deep into the stats and seeing what we can make out of them.
Yes, it's important to know, obviously, first 10 games we won 8, drew 2 of those. It's been kind of, everyone goes back to, is this some mythical time where we were playing like prime Barcelona and we were just batting teams away left, right and centre. So I kind of, we're going to look at how are Spurs progressing, what is the differences between the first 10 games and the last 10 games. The reason we've taken the last 10 games is, as you said, it's the time where, you know, Bentancur, Maddison, they've been coming back into the team. Son's been coming back from the Asia Cup as well. So we've got like quite a decent sample size of the back four as well were back together in the last 10 games. So what are the differences statistically anyway? Because I think in the last 10 games it's been 5 wins. It's been 5 wins, 2 defeats and 2 draws, I believe, in the last 10. It's been, sorry, one sec, 5 wins, 3 defeats and 2 draws. So the results haven't been quite as good, but are we much worse in the data? Is there something wrong, or have we been unlucky? Let's look at the data. So we've taken some criteria with Spurs in possession, comparing the first 10 games and the last 10 games. As you can see, goals, first 10 games we're getting 1.9 a game, last 10 1.6. Shots, we're taking a lot more shots in the first 10 games, 17.8 compared to now 13.5. Shots on target as well, it's been much more in the first 10, 6.2 compared to 4.7. XG is fairly similar but still higher in the first 10 games, 1.75 to 1.62. Key passes, 13.5 in the first 10, 10.8 in the last 10 games. But what's quite interesting is these kind of numbers in terms of the positions we're taking up. So like the passes into the final third, 43.2 in the first 10, 45 in the last 10. So we're actually getting more passes. Passes in the penalty area, 12.5 in the first 10, 13 in the last 10. Passes completed, 547 per 90 in the first 10, 578 in the last 10. Progressive distance, it's 2,897 in the first 10, 3,038 in the last 10. So I kind of feel like it's interesting. We're having more. If you look at the progressive passes, progressive carries, 26.7 in the first 10, 25.5 in the last 10. Carries into the final third, 17.7 in the first 10, 15.7 in the last 10. Possession, if you look at the possessions, has 61% possession in the first 10, 65% in the last 10. So what's quite interesting I find about these stats is we're having more of the ball, we're making more passes in the final third, more passes in the penalty area, yet we're creating less chances, we're getting less shots on target, we're creating less shots and less XG as well. So I wonder why that is. So you would associate, from what on the eye test, we'd be getting less of the ball in the final third, but we're actually getting more of the ball in the final third now, but we're creating less chances.
Yeah, it's because for me, the 2 players that have dropped off from the first 10 to the last 10 has been Bissouma and James Maddison. I don't think James Maddison's playing awfully, but he's not playing anywhere near to the levels of the first 10 games. Bissouma has had a clear drop-off in the attacking metrics. Bissouma used to get the ball from deep, drive forward, create key passes, be really difficult to deal with in the attacking phase as well as the defensive phase. James Maddison was just a complete hub of the team, key pass after key pass after key pass, goal contribution after goal contribution after goal contribution. These kind of players, in my opinion, haven't stepped up in those kind of ways in the last 10 games. So we're getting the ball a lot in the final third, but we're just passing it around kind of without hurting the opposition as much as we were in those first 10 games.
I think these stats are quite telling as well. Touches in the final third, 220 212 in the first 10, 233 in the last 10. So a lot more, quite a significant amount more touch in the final third. Yet touches in the penalty area, 37 in the first 10, 33 in the last 10. So we're having more touches in the opposition's final third, yet we're being less penetrative. We're not getting to those dangerous positions as much. Also, as well, carries in the penalty area, 9.8 in the first 10, 7.9 in the last 10. So it's as if what I feel like is we're having a lot more of the ball, but it's a bit like what Maddison was saying after the Newcastle game. We're being too safe. We're not taking enough risks. We're not getting the ball in the dangerous areas like we were, even though it's like teams are allowing us more into their half and they're inviting us on more, but we're finding it a lot harder to get into those goal scoring positions like we were in the first 10 games. And I think this stat as well maybe exemplifies that. Attempted dribbles in the first 10 games, 25 per 90, and now it's only 20, so we're 5 dribbles down attempted of what we were doing. So we're taking less risk, we're playing a lot safer, and even though we're getting into the opposition's half a lot more and deeper into their half, we're not getting into the dangerous positions as much.
And it doesn't surprise me, these stats. I think if you just go on the eye test as well, you could probably say very similar things to what the stats are saying, to be fair. You know, a lot of people are calling it shoehorn football, where we're just passing it around the penalty area, looking for those perfect goals without being risk-taking. What was our key factors in those first 10 games was the dribbling ability of Missouma and Maddison, and I just don't think they're doing those kind of things as much as they were in those first 10 games, and I think the stats are airing that out. Yeah,
so I think it's quite interesting to look at these stats, because
you just remember like that, the Chelsea game, the Manchester United game, a lot of those games in the first 10 games, I can't remember the specificities of those ones, but you remember Bissouma, how he used to charge forward with the ball. Do you remember how he completely laid down Casemiro in that game against Manchester United? I mean, when have we ever seen Bissouma do that in the last 10 games?
Yeah, and we've just been playing it a lot safer. I feel like we're not taking those risks. We're not taking those risky balls that can get a lot of payoff. And yeah, in those first 10 games, we even made quite a few mistakes. I even remember saying, like, we lost the ball quite a lot, but it's risk versus reward. And the amount of reward we used to get from driving past players, taking those risks when passing into the final third and into the penalty area, it used to pay off tenfold. And now it feels like we're playing it a lot safer. We're keeping a lot more of the ball. But it's like a bit like what I think Ange said after the West Ham game, keeping a lot of ball with lack of conviction. Though we don't have that conviction that we did have earlier in the season. Even though the stats would suggest we're having a lot more of the possession of the ball, we're having a lot more touches in the final third, we're having less touches in the penalty area, we're taking less shots on target, and less XG, and those are the crucial factors.
But it's also interesting to find out why this kind of thing would be happening, because it's not going to be instruction from Ange, because we know Ange likes to press forward, likes to play risky football. It's not going to be for James Maddison, because we know the way James Maddison likes to play. And Bissouma as well, his natural game is to go forward and take risks and to be press resistant, using his dribbling ability. So why are these things happening?
Yeah, and it's hard to put your finger on why. Bissouma is clearly at the moment not the same player. Maddison, I feel like maybe these next set of stats will explain why, because I feel like maybe a lot of it is teams are adapting to what we are trying to do. And I'm not saying we're being sussed out, because, you know, we're still fifth. In our last 10 games, we've still got 5 wins and 2 draws. So it's not like we've completely dropped off, but obviously it's not been the same as the first 10 games. But you saw on the weekend is a perfect example. Newcastle, I was reading a YouTube comment from a Newcastle fan on our video, and he said it's only the second time this season Newcastle have really adapted their formation and the way they play for the opposition. The only other time they did it was against Man City, and they did it again yesterday. So I feel like maybe teams are coming with very specific plans to combat what we're trying to do, because they've worked out how we try to play, and they're now combating that. So what's quite interesting, if we've got another table, these are the opposition stats against Spurs for these key metrics as well, and how they've changed from the first 10 games to the last 10 games. So in terms of like goals, they're scoring more goals, 0.8 in the first 10, 1.6 in the last 10, so we're conceding double the amount of goals that we were. But what's quite interesting, shots, we're conceding less shots, 12.5 in the first 10, 11 in the last 10. Shots on target, though, very similar, 3.9 in the first 10, 4 in the last 10, so pretty much the same. But the XG is a bit higher, 1.25 in the first 10, 1.56 in the last 10. Key passes, 9.8 in the first 10, 8.1 in the last 10. So actually conceding less key passes. We're conceding less chances, but the level of chances is better recently, which is quite interesting. Passes in the final third, we conceded 21 per game in the first 10, 19.8 in the last 10. So it's actually gone down. Passes into the penalty area, 7.2 in the first 10, 6.5 in the last 10. Again, it's gone down. Passes completed overall, 308 per 90 in the first 10, 264 in the last 10. Again, it's gone down. So actually, the opposition having less of the ball in the final third, less of the ball in the penalty area, yet they're creating better quality chances. So are they adapting to like maybe hitting us more in those transitional moments, and when they get their opportunities, they're making much more use of the opportunities to go forward, rather in the first 10 games, it seems like they had a bit more of the ball, but the chances they were creating were of lesser quality.
Yeah, maybe it's also to do with us playing it a bit safer, with these players that I mentioned not performing to the way they were performing before. It's kind of culminating in them not having as many chances, but because of the nature of the way we play anyway, those chances that they're getting are higher quality chances, because maybe we're not going forward as much and maybe penetrating them as much as it was before.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because you look at the defensive stats. There's actually all of them have gone down, like in terms of how much possession the opposition's having, how many touches in the attacking third. They had 132 per game in the first 10, only 116 in the last 10. So we've reduced the amount of time they're having possession in our half, the amount of touches they're having in our half, the amount of touches they're having in our box. You'd assume if you reduce that, the danger goes down. But the level of chances we are conceding in terms of the quality of the chances has gone up, and that's the big problem. So maybe teams are being a bit smarter. They're giving us a bit more of the ball. They're being a bit more settled in their defence. They're sitting a bit deeper, and they're concentrating on those transitions rather than concentrating on trying to keep possession against us and trying to score goals in that way. It seems like teams are being a bit smarter now against us than they were earlier in the season.
Yeah, and I'd like to see the difference between these stats home and away, because there is a clear difference when Spurs play home, when Spurs play away. We're able to stamp our authority more, we're able to play our football much easier when we play at home. But when we play away, we're getting found out way too often. You know, all our terrible performances this season have been away from home. You look at the Brighton game, you look at the Wolves game, you look at the game just now, the Newcastle game, the Fulham game. All these games where we've been proper found out and we've left wanting, not even scoring goals in two of them, and conceding way too many goals than we should be in a game of football, are all happening away from home. So I'd like to see maybe the differences of these stats home to away.
Yeah, I don't have that, unfortunately, but maybe that can be another video. But I think what we can maybe conclude from the video, I think there's two things happening. I think Spurs are not being as risk-taking as they were earlier in the season. Maybe it's, but there could be two reasons for that. Is it because teams are adapting and making it more difficult to do that, sitting a bit deeper and not giving us the space they were in those first 10 games, which means if they're not giving us that space, even though we're having more touches in the penalty area, in the opposition's half, they're restricting us to that space, making it harder to get into the penalty area? Or are we not getting those good chances because Spurs are not being brave enough on the ball, not taking the risks they were by dribbling past players and committing players and opening up spaces themselves? There's two ways of looking at it. You could say Spurs are not doing it themselves, or the opposition are forcing Tottenham to go about it in a different way. So it's quite difficult to put your finger on exactly why the results haven't been quite as good in the last 10 games as they were in the first 10, even though obviously the team is back together now. But I think there are probably a few. It's probably multivariate why. I think you can say obviously different games will be different reasons, but I definitely think oppositions are being a lot smarter against us. They're playing in a different way than they were in the first 10, being a bit more pragmatic, being a bit smarter, dropping a bit deeper and hitting us in transition, not needing as many chances as they did in the first 10 games. But as well, Tottenham themselves are not being as brave on the ball as they were in the first 10 games of the season.
Yeah, I do think it's also a case of, they've worked like you're saying, that they have worked out a bit how we play and maybe are trying to stifle us a bit in that situation where James Maddison may be getting marked out of games a bit. They're putting a bit of extra care onto James Maddison in terms of on the football pitch. But I don't think they're putting, from the eye test anyway, too much care onto the way Bissouma plays. I think he's just regressed into the terms of the way he has been playing. And I feel like if we were to put more risk into the way we play from the number 6 position to the midfield, more gaps will start to open up and you will see Spurs create more chances and create more high quality chances. And yes, there might be chances going the other way as well, but I do think that the risk, the high reward will outweigh the kind of negativity that maybe that, and it can go back to a bit of a similar way that we did see in the first 10 games of the season. So for me, I'd like to see us use that risk a lot better in the midfield than we have been doing the last 10 games, because the way we attack at the moment just becomes a bit too predictable, passing it around the edge of the area, not really penetrating them. And the only way we can seem to score our goals at the moment is maybe Brennan passing it to the back post to Timo Werner, and maybe vice versa with Timo finding Brennan at the back post. And we don't seem to find any other avenues of goals at the moment, which is a source of frustration.
Yes, how do we solve this problem? First of all, obviously we need Bissouma and to start playing better as well. But I think one way to solve it is if teams are going to start being a bit smarter against us, like it seems they are, they're having less touches, but they're okay with that. We need players who are better at hanging onto the ball in the final third. Maybe that means bringing Decky back in. Maybe that means putting a Lo Celso or Decky into centre mid next to a Maddison to make sure we're really keeping the ball in that final third and making those teams work. Because I feel like at the moment there's two-pronged thing. We're giving the ball away way too much in that final third, and we're just allowing teams to transition way too easily. If we're better at keeping the ball, it's going to be a lot more difficult for teams to hit us on the transition, because we can get a lot more settled and we in our positioning, and it means that we can pen them in a lot more if we can keep the ball in the final third. It seems like at the moment we're progressing the ball up quickly, yet we're being very sloppy in the final third, giving the ball away very carelessly, and it allows us to be hit with way too many transitions going in behind, and it's way too easy for teams to get into our back line. Whereas if we had better players in the final third who are hanging onto the ball, like players who are on Maddison's level or similar, then it'll be a lot more difficult for teams to win the ball back off us. And then as well, when they do win the ball back off us, we're going to be much more in set positions rather than right now where it seems a bit haphazard.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we need a monstrous number 6 to give us that cover in defence. I'm a big advocate for Spurs signing Amadou Onana this summer, because I think he would just add us that defensive solidity. The amount of ground he covers as well is just incredible. And I know, you were looking at the stats between him and Bissouma with Daigle, and they do read similar, but the data is skewed in my opinion in terms of playing for Everton and playing for Tottenham Hotspur. It's two completely different kettles of fish. And I think if you put Amadou Onana in the 6 and have him just gobble up everything, which I think he can do with the energy and applications that he puts in the middle of the park, then you can have two ball playing players in the middle of the park that can keep the ball on a consistent basis, whether it be a Bentancur and a Maddison and Lo Celso, a Maddison or a Kulusevski, two of those players in the middle of the park that can really help us penetrate defences and really keep the ball and make us that exciting outfit going forward again.
Yeah, and that's also maybe something we have to look at in the summer if Bissouma can't do that role. I think obviously early in the season, I think his defensive numbers in general are pretty good, but what I feel like with Bissouma, it's not so much his defensive numbers. It's more because I do think he makes a good number of tackles and interceptions. It's more he loses concentration when he's marking people and he lets people run past him. He doesn't sometimes follow a player right into the penalty box and allows them to make those late runs into the box, and teams are really cottoning onto that.
And we lose too many goals like that.
And we've lost a few goals like that. So that's what he's got to work on, his concentration throughout the whole game. So it's difficult at the moment. I don't think we're in a terrible way, but obviously we're not in a way that we were earlier in the season. I think the stats bear that out. We haven't obviously gotten better or progressed. The numbers, obviously, I don't think are worlds apart, but I think the little differences when you stretch it out make a big difference overall, and I think that's what is costing us at the moment, points and goals. And let's hope in the last 6 games we can kind of see a difference or make up for it, but it's a very tough run-in, so we'll have to see how these last 6 games go.
And regardless of the run-in, you look at some of the games, like that game against Newcastle and that game against Fulham, you couldn't have envisaged that happening in the first 10 games of the season. You know, we were top of the league, we were unbeaten. Even when we didn't have a particularly good game, we found ways to get through games and to win the game. And now, when Spurs are not having a good game, we seem to be just getting eaten alive, particularly away from home, against teams that have particular plans for us, like Fulham did, like Newcastle did. So we need to figure out ways how to combat against teams away from home that come up with particular sets of plans for us, because at the moment we've got no answer for those kind of situations.
Yeah, and I think that is fair, but I also think that's part of the process, isn't it? Like, you have a set way of playing. Sometimes it works straight away, sometimes it doesn't. For us, thankfully, it did work straight away. But then teams start sussing you out, teams start being smarter against you, and then part of the process is figuring out how to overcome that as well. And that's maybe what we're going through at the moment. So let's hope Ange can figure out a way of combating these issues. And I think as well, I read as well some quotes from Ange recently saying this season's all about ingraining our set way of playing, and then when we go into next season, then once it's ingrained and it's almost like second nature, then we can start adapting that way of playing, and then we can start using different tactical tweaks to combat different things. So maybe it's a case of right now we're going to have to put up with it with a view of the long term, but we'll have to wait and see how these next 6 games go.
And also, you look at the way Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool have had potential struggles, in which games that they have potential struggles in this season. It's the games against the kind of Crystal Palaces. It's the game against the kind of Aston Villas. And these all teams, what they have, they all sit in a kind of mid-block. And these teams that have heavy possession all kind of seem to struggle against teams with a mid-block. And the good teams, the Arsenals, the Man Cities, the Liverpools, they find ways around that, and they kind of tweak things tactically so they can get around that and they can score goals and they can come up against these mid-block teams quite successfully. And I think because Spurs are so early on in the kind of development of the team, it will come. It's just that right now, it does seem like we're banging our heads against a brick wall when we're coming up against these kind of teams, particularly away from home. But I do have full confidence in Ange, and particularly when we bring in players in the summer, that we will be able to combat that.
All right.
But that is your tactical analysis between the first 10 games and the last 10 games. Let us know in the comment section below your thoughts regarding where the team is at the moment. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always,
come on, you Spurs.